thank Senator Portman for organizing this and Senator Johnson for his contribution. Let me start by this point. It seems to me that the two top priorities that the budget and really most of what we do here ought to have, two top priorities ought to be, one, policies that will help encourage strong economic growth, the recovery that we need, the job creation that would come with it. That's number one. And number two, putting our federal government on a sustainable path, because we're not on a sustainable fiscal path now. And if we don't get on a sustainable path soon, we're inviting really a crisis. We're inviting a disaster. It's my view that the president's budget fails badly on both fronts. On the economic front, a number of areas. First and foremost is just the budget that proposes a growing budget deficit. The president who promised us that in his first term he would cut the deficit in half, in fact, is proposing that in fiscal year 2012, this year, we will have a deficit that's bigger than last year and almost as big as the all-time record high. Nowhere's near cutting these deficits in half. And huge deficits themselves have a chilling effect on economic growth because they discourage investment. Everybody knows that when you're racking up massive amounts of debt, unprecedented amounts of debt, as we are doing right now, there's a huge threat that the result will be either dramatic inflation or much higher taxes or both. And given that threat, business and entrepreneurs understandably are reluctant to take a risk, to make an investment, to grow a business, to hire workers. So that's point number one. Point number two is a little bit more technical and very specific that I'd like to make, and that is the president's idea that we ought to tax dividend income, which is to say investment in business, at ordinary income rates instead of at the current 15% rate. And I just want to illustrate why I think that's a particularly bad idea and why that will hurt our economy and weaken our ability to create jobs. This little chart demonstrates what this really means is what the president's really proposing is effectively a 63% tax on investment in a business. And the reason I say that is as follows. If you imagine yourself, you've saved, let's say you've saved some money and you want to invest in a business so that that business can grow and hire workers, how will these taxes be paid? Well, right now we have just about the highest corporate income tax rate in the world. So if you make an investment in a business and that business makes a profit, first thing that company has to do is pay 35 of every $100 that it makes. Let's assume the company makes $100 at the 35% top income tax rate that the company pays. $35 is taken, goes to the government. So the after-tax income for that business is $65. Well, that's what the owners of the business get, right? Well, not quite. If the dividend is then paid to the owners of the business, the president wants that to be taxed now at the ordinary income tax rate. And by the way, he wants that rate to go from the current rate of 35 up to 43.4, a top marginal income tax rate of 39.6, plus the 3.8% from the health care bill that was passed, brings the top marginal income tax rate to 43%. So I know this gets a little bit confusing, but at the end of the day, it's really not that complicated. The $65 that's remaining after the corporation pays its income tax, if that gets paid to the investor, that's now, under the president's plan, would be subject to a 43% further tax. That's another $28 that gets taken from that initial $100 of income, leaving the investor with $37 out of the $100 that this business makes. So the president's plan is if you want to invest in a business to help grow this economy and create jobs, the business, your activity will be subject to having almost 2/3 of the income taken. And you're left with about 1/3. Now, what is the net effect of this? It's just a huge disincentive to invest, to grow a business, to take a risk. And most of the rest of the world does not have tax rates this high, does not have a corporate tax rate this high. And therefore, it's a further incentive for capital to move elsewhere. See, I think we ought to be pursuing policies that encourage maximum economic growth, not policies that absolutely discourage savings and investment and the growth that comes with it. And if Senator Portman tells me I've got a couple more minutes, I'll make one other point if I could. And that is to switch to the sustainable fiscal profile, which we are not on now. You know, the president, to his credit, has put his finger precisely on what is the long-term problem that we face. And he has described it as the mandatory health care spending, the entitlement programs as a general matter. He's exactly right. And when you look at his budget, it's very revealing. If you take just the following categories, take Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, and interest on our debt, just those items. And you look at what the president has proposed for those items over the next 10 years, it's an average annual increase of almost 8%, 7.8% to be precise. But he's only proposing that the economy is going to be able to grow by about 5%, and frankly, that's optimistic. So what happens if you have huge government programs growing faster than the economy each and every year? For as far as the eye can see, that's the definition of unsustainable, because these programs consume ever more of the budget and ever more of the economy until something has to collapse. And this is why I'm so disappointed that the president has not so much as suggested an idea for how we might reform the long-term, totally unsustainable path that they're on. And most of us, Republicans in this body and in the other body, believe that what we need to do is make some changes for future retirees. We're not talking about changing the rules for people who are currently retired or about to retire, but people my age and younger and my kids. When are we going to acknowledge that we've got to fix this so that these programs can survive for the next generation? If we refuse, if we continue to go on this path, well, we're going to face the kind of financial crisis that they're facing in Europe. We've got a limited window of opportunity to solve this. It's not too late for us to avoid the fate of our friends on the other side of the Atlantic, but I would suggest we don't have time to lose. I think the president has missed a big opportunity to provide some leadership, and I hope we will make up for that in this body. With that, I'd be happy to yield back to my colleague from Ohio.